Hello everyone, it's Gwen from Reading a Gwen, and today I'm going to go through my planned reads or just the list of books I can pick from in the next month for the Olympic Readathon challenge put on by the Shelf Space Reading Group. There are 16 prompts, each named after a Greek god or goddess, and I'm choosing to pick 2 potential books that I can read for that prompt just so I have some options going through the month. I obviously do not think I'm going to get through all of these books. I am unfortunately not a speed reader. I know some of y'all can definitely read 30-something books a month, but that's not me. So the first god is good old Zeus, and the prompt for him is to read a book that features a kingdom or a patriarchy. My first pick for that is going to be The Wicked King by Holly Black. I read The Cool Prince a couple years ago and I did enjoy it, and I've been meaning to continue on with the series, but I've just been distracted by so many different things that I think now is finally the time to finish this series. Can't go too much into this one because it is the sequel, but for those of you not familiar already with this story, it's about Jude, whose parents were killed by fairy, and she was subsequently raised by fairy in the fairy realm. And basically it follows her and a man named Cordan, who is a fairy, and they don't get along. My next pick for Zeus is The King of the Labyrinth, Cry of the Minotaur. This is volume 1 of a light novel series. This is by Sheehan Beast. This is basically about a Minotaur who is the king of the labyrinth, so maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it fits. But this is basically about a Minotaur who wants someone who's an actual, equal in battle. Every time someone comes to fight him, the stronger they are, the stronger he gets, and he's not finding anyone who's a good match for him. And that's basically all it is. We don't get a lot about it. It's just like this little paragraph blurb. So I think it sounds interesting. Plus, it's Minotaur. I think that's Greek, right? So it fits. The next god is Poseidon, and the prompt that goes with him is to read a book that includes water. My first pick for this prompt is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This is about a couple who's getting married on an island, and essentially a storm rolls in. I believe it's not necessarily a retelling, but it's definitely inspired by And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. Basically, they're having a wedding. Bunch of wedding guests are there, a storm rolls in, things get choppy, and someone dies, and we don't know who the murderer is. My next pick for Poseidon is Drowned Country by Emily Tesh. This is the sequel to Silver in the Wood, which is another novella. I don't know much about it. I believe I just saw Books and Lala say she loved it, and I was just intrigued. I think it's about a woodsman and a fae, but this is the sequel. I will be reading the first one first. I haven't read that one yet, but this is my other pick for Poseidon. Our next god is Hades, and his prompts are to read a book that involves ghosts or an undead kind of theme in the story. So my first pick for this prompt is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is a story about one of Dracula's wives and basically some political intrigue, I think, sort of going on with Dracula, and she's trying to unravel it along with the help and comfort of the other wives. I believe it's more of a polygamous, it's not just Dracula with a whole bunch of wives, the wives love each other as well as Dracula, and it's one big relationship. Obviously I haven't read it, and I've only seen one other person talk about this, but I'm excited to read it. It features Dracula, so vampires are pretty undead. My next pick is The Girl Who Wasn't There by Kirk Slater. This is a book set in the Victorian era. I believe it's a kind of classic ghost story. It's about a woman who goes to a manor for employment. I don't know if she's a housekeeper or I don't think she's a nanny. I think she's a caretaker possibly for the old woman who lives there, but they don't appear to be the only people living in that house. So I think it's just a short little spooky ghost story, and it was a Kickstarter reward that I got a bit ago, and I would definitely like to get to it. All right, next we have our first goddess, and that is Hestia. Her prompt is to read something with a found family trope. My first pick for that is good old Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This would be a reread for me. I'd read it many times before, but my good old trade paperback that I kind of liked the cover of more, unfortunately got some hot chocolate spilled on it when my cat was a little naughty. But this, I mean, it's the book that the Studio Ghibli movie was based on. It's about Sophie, who gets turned into an old woman and finds herself aboard the castle of the fearsome wizard Howl, and basically the found family between her and Calcifer, and I'm totally forgetting, wow, I'm forgetting the little boy's name. But the little boy in the movie is actually like a young man in this. But I loved it. I've always loved it. I've loved the whole series. I love the movie, and it's very much a comfort read for me, and definitely any chance I can read this, I will. My next pick for the found family trope is Library of the Unwritten. This is by A.J. Hackwith. This is about, if I remember right, it's about a woman who works in the unwritten wing of the libraries of hell, and it's the stories that were never like finished by their authors, and one of the heroes from the stories gets loose from his book, and she's basically trying to track him down and keep chaos from unfolding. Of course, that doesn't go well when an angel gets involved and everything descends into chaos anyway. I love basically everything that is centered around the mythos of hell. It's one of my favorite kind of themes, and adding hell with kind of literary themes like this just sounds like a recipe for something I'm gonna love. The next god we have is Hephaestus, and it is to have a title or cover that includes fire. My first pick is a middle grade series that I've been wanting to get into, and that is Wings of Fire. This is the first book in the series, The Dragonette Prophecy, and it is by Tui T. Sutherland. This sounds like it's kind of the typical like chosen one trope where something's gonna happen and he and his friends are destined to stop it, but all of the characters are dragons and it's told from the point of view of a dragon character, and that sounds very interesting to me, and I have heard good things, especially Emily from Snake Discovery. If anyone follows kind of the reptile side of YouTube, she's had nothing but good things to say about it, and I have finally kind of caved in and I got the whole series, so about time I got into it. So the next god we have is Dionysus, and his prompt is to read a book with a red or white cover. My first pick for that is Ring Shout by, I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, P. DeJelly Clark. I'm sorry. If anyone knows how to pronounce that, please tell me. I hope I'm close at least. But this is in the early 1900s, 1915, when Ku Klux Klan was around. I'm not entirely sure if it's the Ku Klux Klan members themselves are demons, or if the Klan has like summoned demons, and there are resistance fighters who are making it their mission to rid the world of the Klan, which, I mean, great either way. Again, a bit of hell mythos mixed in, and I'm told there's a lot of dark humor in here, which is something I love, and I definitely wanted to pick it up, so now's my chance. My next pick for this prompt is Tender is the Flesh. This is by Agustina Bazterrica. I can't roll my R's, I'm sorry. But this is set, again, like these novellas, I really haven't looked into much about what they're about, just because, I mean, they're short. I don't want to have too much given away. But if I remember correctly, this is about a woman that lives in the future when like a virus of some sort has gotten into like the animal meat, and the only meat that is now safe to consume is human meat. So now there's regular people, and then there's humans that have been farmed for their meat. Definitely horror. I've heard it's kind of gruesome. Definitely up my alley. I'm on like a horror kick right now, so I'm rocking a little bit of my Midsummer vibes. I loved that movie, but I definitely want to make sure I get to this. All right, our next god is Hermes, and his prompt is a book that includes travel, vacations, journeys, quests, like anything along those lines. So my first pick is Straight On Till Morning by Liz Braswell. This is one of Disney's Twisted Tales. I read the Mulan one, and I really loved it, and I loved the idea of bringing in a little more of that kind of original darkness that these stories had. And this one is about Wendy, instead of meeting Peter Pan and going to Neverland, she kind of narrowly missed meeting him, and 4 years later actually ends up meeting Captain Hook and going to Neverland with him. And she and Tinkerbell end up having to team up to save Peter Pan in Neverland. My next pick for that is The Memory Theater by Karen Tidbeck. This is set in kind of like an alternate world where there are masters who have like teenagers, but once you get to be too old, I believe you're killed. So there are, what were their names? Thistle and Dora are two such teens who are nearing the time when they're too old. So they try to escape, so they go back and forth between their world and ours, and there's a lot of just kind of like space and time bending, and it sounds like it's going to be a heck of a ride. It's pretty short, so I think it sounds really cool, really fast-paced, hopefully, and exciting. And it was definitely on my kind of list of most anticipated releases, and I am glad my library happened to have it, so I can have it for this readathon. Our next god is Artemis, and their prompt is a book with the moon or a night somewhere on the cover. My first pick for that is the novel version of The Night is Short, Walk On Girl. This is originally by Tomohiko Morimi. I saw the movie for this when it came out in theaters. I don't know how to describe what this is about. Very surrealist, but it's about a girl who basically, she goes out for a night, and it's just her kind of drinking and going through her night and running into various dudes and just weird stuff happening. Plus, I promised my friend like forever ago that I would read this, so it's probably about time I hopped on it. My next pick for this prompt is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. It appears to be night on the cover, so I'm assuming that counts. This is basically a horror thriller novel about gentrification. It's about a woman named Sydney who lives in Brooklyn, and it seems like every time she blinks, a neighbor is moving out, white people keep moving in, condos and homes keep going up for sale, and she and a neighbor end up kind of looking into it and find, yes, Kiki. She wanted to join in. But anyway, so they find that the neighbors that have moved out may not have actually moved, may not have done so willingly, and the whole plan to kind of, what was the term, revitalize the neighborhood may be a little bit more deadly than initially thought. I've heard very high praises. I know Jesse from Bow Ties and Books, they really loved it. They had like a whole video dedicated to why this was horror and creepy. So I'm hoping to get into it and really love it just as much. If you hear licking sounds, Kiki is on my lap and is bathing herself. So I don't know how loud that's gonna pick up. So the next god is Apollo, and his prompts are to read books that are told in a non-traditional format. That basically includes manga, comics, verse, poetry, novellas, just anything that's not like a standard book. My first pick for that is The Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh. I talked about the sequel earlier. This is a male-male love story. It's about, it looks like a just kind of wild man being who lives in the forest of Green Hollow surrounding Green Hollow Hall, and he's kind of lived there for a long time, just kind of doing his thing, when a new handsome man who is a little too curious moves into Green Hollow Hall, and it's basically them meeting, and I think they fall in love. And my second pick for this prompt is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This is one that I have heard so much about. If you have been living under a rock and haven't heard about this, it's basically about a young man. I believe his brother was shot. And in case you've been living under a rock and have not heard about this, this is about a young African American boy whose brother was shot, and it's kind of told as he's going down the elevator on his way to basically get revenge for his brother. People like who aren't really there keep coming into the elevator and kind of talking to him as he's going down and helping him kind of figure out what he really wants to do. It's told in verse or poetry. I'm not normally one who likes verse and poetry, but I've heard so many good things about this book. I really want to give it a try. If I don't fully vibe with the kind of poetry telling, I know that this was recently made into a comic format, and if I don't fully vibe with this, I'll definitely check that out. Alright, our next prompt is Aries, and his prompt is to read a book that is a military-centered sci-fi and fantasy. My first pick, and I know I just said I don't like poetry, it's probably still going to be the case for this, but I'm trying to get through a scratch-off poster of 100 classics, and this is obviously one of them, and that is The Odyssey by Homer. I mean, I'm assuming we all probably read this in school. This is basically a military-based adventure where Odysseus takes his men on a crazy fantasy adventure. Obviously, it is considered an epic poem. Hoping this is going to go fairly quickly. I didn't super enjoy it in school, but I'm willing to give it another shot. I know that school tends to kind of ruin books for people, so I'm hoping enough time has passed that I can enjoy it as much as possible in its own right, just reading it. My next story that I am a little more excited about is Dragon Pearl by Eunha Lee. This is about a 13-year-old girl who is part of a line of fox spirits, and she has waited her whole life to be able to join the space forces with her older brother. And when her older brother disappears and the military claims that he basically abandoned his post to go looking for the Dragon Pearl, she thinks something is wrong and decides to go after him. This is basically a middle grade space opera, and I've been wanting to read it for a very long time. It looks so, the cover is so pretty, and I've heard basically nothing but good things about the story. Next we have Aphrodite, and her prompt is a book with a beautiful cover. My first pick for that prompt is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This is set in a very draconian Japan where things go missing, and the memory police basically make sure that the public doesn't remember that it ever existed in the first place. And I think people go missing as well. And it's basically a young writer, her editor is in trouble, and she hides the editor in her floorboards, and they kind of work together to try and protect him, but also try to preserve the memories of things that the memory police are trying to kind of get rid of and pretend like never existed. But this cover, let me get it closer for you guys. It's so beautiful. I just love these sketch patches and stuff. Something about it is really stunning to me. My next pick for this is Lakewood by Megan Giddings. This is about a young black woman who basically needs money. She gets a new job as kind of a research subject for a lot of stuff that almost seems too good to be true, like eye drops that change your eye color, the cure for dementia, stuff like that. But the side effects on the test subjects may be less than optimal. This is basically a horror book that's a look into the basically horrifying scientific testing, using black bodies as just test animals, and the obviously horrible effect that has on those people. So it's not very long. I've heard really good things about this, and the cover, just something about the simplicity and the way that she is rendered is super beautiful. I'm sorry, it's a library book, so it's really shiny. But I can't wait to get to this one too. Our next goddess is Hera, and her prompt is to read a book that features a queendom or a matriarchy. My first pick is Failure Frame. This is a light novel. It's by Kaoru Shinozaki and illustrated by KWKM. And this is about a guy. A bunch of people were summoned into a world by the resident goddess, which is why I'm kind of putting it in this, because everything is run by a goddess, and she needs them to use their powers to basically help save the planet, world, whatever it is. But he ends up being, his powers are useless to her, they're not as powerful. So she basically banishes him to a dungeon where, in his attempt to get out, he discovers that his powers are just unique and they're not like everyone else's, but when he figures out how to use them properly, they're actually very powerful. So this is a story of revenge as he's trying to claw his way back to the surface world and get revenge on the goddess for banishing him into a dungeon for basically no reason. Next is one I'm super excited for. I read the first book in the series and absolutely loved it. I have been dying to read the second one, and that is The Everlasting Rose. This is the second book in the Bells series. It's by Danielle Clayton. This is basically set in a world where people are like these kind of gray-skinned, monstery looking things, and the Bells, who are born not looking like that, can use their special Bell powers to make you look however you want. They can change your skin color, your body shape, your height, your eye color, your hair type, everything. And Camellia is our main character from the first book. She basically gets chosen to be the queen or princess's Belle, which is like a very high honor, and a lot of political intrigue and very thrilling stuff happens. I know the first book, it was kind of like sweet Lolita fashion mixed with kind of like thriller horror, and I just really loved it. And I can't wait to get to the second one. I won't go into really what this is about because obviously it's the sequel and I don't want to give anything away from the first book. But if this is even half as amazing as the first book was, I'm sure to love it, and I definitely can't recommend the first book enough for sure. Alright, next we have Demeter, and his prompt is to read a book with food on the cover. My first pick for this is Mirror Mirror. This is by Jen Kellanida. This is another Disney Twisted Tales, and this one is a Snow White retelling. Obviously there's an apple, and the premise is that Snow White's kind of evil stepmom is the evil queen, and Snow White lives in the castle. And the premise is, what if instead the evil queen poisoned the prince? And it's basically Snow White trying to kind of save her kingdom and people from the evil queen. My next pick for this prompt is If I Disappear by Eliza Jane Brazier. But this is about a young woman whose favorite podcast hostess goes missing, and she basically tries to follow the clues that were in her previous podcast episodes to find her, and she finds herself in the kind of wilds of Northern California. And the deeper she looks and the closer she gets, the more kind of off and not right things start to seem, and the more she finds that Rachel, the podcast host, is not the first nor the last woman to go missing from the ranch that she finds. Alright, next we have Athena, and her prompt is to read a book that includes political intrigue. My first pick for that is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I've been dying to read this series. I've heard such good things about it, but they're a little bit chunky and a little bit intimidating. I'm really hoping to get to it soon. I don't know if I'll get to it this month, but I'm really gonna try. But this is about a woman named, what was her name? Hello, Kiki. Yeah, it wasn't very graceful. This is the story about a con woman on the streets of 18th century Cairo, and she accidentally summons a djinn warrior. Sorry, Kiki's trying to get comfortable. And basically he whisks her away to his kingdom where he's from, and there's a whole bunch of political intrigue, and she meets a prince, and there's a bunch of deceit and political intrigue, and I have just heard so many wonderful things about this series. I'm really hoping I can at least start it this month. Next is Illuminae. This is by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This, I mean, everyone's pretty familiar with Illuminae at this point, right? It's about a couple that breaks up and then horrible timing. Basically, their world gets invaded and now they have to work together to like basically bring people to safety and kind of figure out what's going on. It's told through like a whole bunch of different stuff, like there's pictures and log entries and I think letters and stuff. I've heard mixed reviews about this series, but I figured I'd give it a try, especially when it's one that's talked about it that much. I guess I have some FOMO, and I figure it won't take too long to get through given how it's laid out. So I will see about getting through this month. Next we have Eos, and their prompt is to read the first book in a series or duology. My first pick is another Kickstarter book, and that is The Young Knight's Dragon Plight. This is by NT Laser. This is about a young knight who his village has been like attacked by a dragon, and he's sent to find the dragon and get revenge. But when he finds the dragon, he finds that both the dragon and the situation are not quite what he thought they were. So now he has to kind of pick what he wants to do. Does he want to get revenge for his village on this dragon, or is there some other path he can take? It's very short, but it is the first in the Young Knight series, and I just feel like giving it a try. My next pick for that prompt is Flunked by Kellanida. This is about kind of the fairy tale world. It's about Gilly, who is the oldest child of basically the people who live in the boot, and she's had to basically steal and commit petty crimes to take care of her siblings. One day she's caught and is sent to fairy tale reform school where the teachers are the ex-villains. Oh, okay, Kiki. Alright, but Gilly finds that a war is brewing, and perhaps these reformed bad guys are not actually that good. Alright, our very last prompt is Nyx, and that is to read a book that is the last book in a series or duology. My first pick is The House of Many Ways by Diana Wynne Jones. This is the third and final book in the Howl's Moving Castle series. I know that there is a middle book. I've read them all multiple times, and they're not super related. Like, the fact that Howl and Sophie are kind of mentioned is about the only like crossover they really have. But this is essentially Howl's great niece comes to take care of his house while he and Sophie are away, and just kind of a little bit of chaos ensues, and she's trying to figure out how all the magical stuff works and keep a couple little magical baddies away from the house. I'm sorry, Kiki has gone full baby. Anyway, the last book of this TBR, and my second choice for final book, is Queen of Nothing by Only Black, and this is the final book in the, I don't know if the series is called it, but the Cruel Prince series. Obviously, I told you already, I don't know what happens in the sequel, certainly can't talk about the third book, but I'm hoping to maybe finish out the series this month. Alright guys, well that is all the books I'm hoping to at least choose from during the Olympic readathon in June. At this point in time, I don't know what team I'm on. Whenever I learn what team I'm on, I'll put it down either in a pinned comment or the description box. And if you're on my team, let's go kick some butt. And even if you're not on my team, I hope that you have a really good time, and I can't wait to see what books y'all are reading and what books you get through. Did anyone choose any of the same books I did? If you've read any of the books I chose already, what did you think of them? If you would like to see my wrap up at the end of June to see what books I ended up going with and what I thought of them, feel free to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!